Hi everyone. I want to show you a simple technique for fermenting grains in the form of flour. And it's not as involved as making sourdough, which has a number of stages and you have to have a good starter and things like this. This is a very simple thing to do. So we're going to make some banana muffins and I'm using spelt flour. And so we're going to use 2 cups of spelt flour, a cup of yellow sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla, 2 to 3 ripe bananas or overly ripe bananas, half a cup of butter, 1.5 teaspoons of vinegar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a cup of chopped pecans, teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of sea salt, and 2 eggs. So that's our basic banana muffin recipe. This is pretty standard. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the ingredients that either are liquid or could be liquid, and we're going to mix them together with just the flour, and we're going to allow that to sit in a bowl covered for about 8 to 12 hours. And what this does is it starts the fermentation process, it makes the grain more digestible, it makes the nutrients in the grain more bioavailable so that you're going to get better benefit from it. And it's pretty straightforward to do. So you can do this with any recipe, any flour, and as long as there's a certain amount of liquid in the recipe, it's not hard to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to melt our butter because that'll turn the butter into liquid. And we're going to use the sugar up front because sugar put into the melted butter will also turn into liquid. And of course, we're going to use our kefir here. So I've got 1/3 of a cup of kefir. And the reason I use kefir is because it also has yeast strains in it, which will help with the fermentation process of the grain. And it's also very helpful for the lift of the muffin as well. But you could use yogurt and you could use even sauerkraut juice if you want, but you want some kind of starter, something that's a starter. So if you weren't using kefir, you could use regular milk or almond milk or whatever choice you like, and then add in a couple of tablespoons of, say, sauerkraut juice. The reason you're doing that is because this is a very short fermentation time and you want to sort of speed up the process. And so that's why I'm using the kefir, but as I said, you could use other fermented things as well. Okay, this is all we have to do to ferment the grain. And so I've melted half a cup of butter and I've put it in a bowl and I'm going to add the sugar to it. And I'm just going to let the melted butter dissolve the sugar a bit. So that gives us more liquid because this recipe doesn't have a lot of liquid. And in order to have enough liquid for the grain so you don't have a big lump of goo, we need more liquid. So I've added the sugar. Now this is my kefir that I'm going to be using in this particular recipe. And you can use regular milk, you can use yogurt, but I'm using kefir. And one of the nice things about the kefir is that it has yeast in it naturally, which can help ferment the grain faster. So now all we have to do is add the flour, and we're going to put 2 cups in, or we're going to try to put 2 cups in. Oops. Put in a little less this time because we put in a little more the last time. Okay, and then we just mix this together. And so this is fairly thick, but it's not so thick that it will be difficult to add the bananas and the eggs, which of course is going to thin the batter down. So this is a nice thickness. It's still soft. And that's what you're looking for. You want it soft so that it's easy to add the other ingredients. Okay, so then this is ready to ferment. And all we have to do is cover it. You can cover it with plastic wrap like I'm doing. or you can just put a plate on top. And then you want to put this someplace warm, so about 75 degrees. Um, if you're in a hurry and you want to do it faster and you have a proofer, you can put it up to a higher temperature like 85 or 95. But normally we just do it at room temperature and we let it sit overnight, and it can sit for, 8 to 12 hours is plenty of time. So anywhere in there is fine. And that doesn't put any pressure on you to, put it like this before you go to bed and then get up first thing and make muffins. If, you're waiting 12 hours, then you've got lots of time to get up and do your thing and then make the muffins. All right, so we will come back to this. All right, so it's been about 10 hours since we did this. And so I'm just going to remove the saran wrap here. And as we can see, this is sort of still soft, which is good. That's what we want to see. Didn't dry out or anything like that. And now we can add the rest of our ingredients. So what I've done is I have pureed the banana. And as I mentioned, it's 2 to 3 bananas. I like a really black banana. I don't like it, I want it overly ripe, and the more ripe it is, the better. So these weren't all that black. So I'm using actually 3 bananas here. I often just use 2 if I can get them to the right over ripeness. I'm just going to put that in. And we're going to add our eggs. And we're going to add our half a teaspoon of vanilla. Our teaspoon of baking soda. And I know this seems like a very strange way to make this. Our half a teaspoon of sea salt. And then we're just going to give it a quick mix. And again, you don't even need a mixer for this. You can do it straight by just using a spatula or a whisk. And then I'm going to add my vinegar now. Oops. And if you're wondering why I'm using vinegar, it just helps with the lift with the baking soda. Now, if you want to use a whisk, you certainly can. Once you have the eggs and the banana in, it's very easy to use a whisk. Okay, and I'm going to add my cinnamon. Again, this is a personal taste thing. If you like cinnamon, you can add this. If you don't, you can leave the cinnamon out. I like cinnamon, so I'm adding my cinnamon. And the last thing I'm going to add is my pecans. Again, you can leave the pecans out. You could add blueberries, you could add other fruits. You can do whatever you like with this. It's very, very happy to cooperate. It's a lovely recipe. All right. So now we're ready to put it into the muffin tins. Okay. Put that over there. So I have a 12 cavity muffin tin here. You could use the paper cups, but what I've done is I've greased it with coconut oil. You could grease it with butter as well. And then I floured it with some of the spelt flour. And we're just going to put this in. And how big you make the muffins is your choice, but I usually just put enough batter in just to maybe about a 1/4 inch or so below the top of the muffin rim. And the baking temperature, I usually bake at 325. You could bake at 350. If you know how your oven works, that's your choice. But the reason I bake at 325 is I find that a slightly lower temperature and a slower rise makes a better textured muffin. It doesn't, I don't know if you've ever seen it where um, a muffin or a cake, it bakes and then there's a crack in the center because there's uh, wet batter underneath. It sort of pushes through as it continues to rise. So a slower rise I find is better, and it just comes out nicer and fluffier and just has a better texture. So I'm baking these at 325 and it will bake for 20 to 30 minutes. Again, that's going to depend on your oven, and hopefully you know your oven well. I would set the temperature to 20 minutes and then come back and check it at that time. That's how I always bake. I always set it under the time that it's required, and that way I never overcook, and I can always wait another 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it takes. But once you've overcooked it, there's nothing you can do. I think this guy needs a little bit more to be, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to put this into the oven and then we'll check it as soon as it's baked. All right, so these are done. What you want to see when you poke them like this, they spring back to the touch and they don't leave a dent. And you can also see they separate a little bit around from the edge. If you go around with your knife, and it's best to do it with, one that's got a flat edge, you'll see they lift up very easily from the tin. So now these can cool for about 5 minutes and then remove them from the tin, and then they're ready to serve. Now, if you like a more mounded muffin, I don't really care one way or another myself personally, a little bit extra flour would have allowed them to be a little more mounded if that's what you like. I like one with a really nice texture, and this is very hot, so it's hard to sort of see what it's like on the inside, but you can see how light and moist it is on the inside. All right, so that's our banana muffins with our fermented spelt. And what we've done here is we've got some resistant starch in our spelt, which is a great prebiotic, but we already started the fermentation process, which means we already produced some short chain fatty acids that are going to be present in this muffin. Of course, our gut will finish the job. We certainly didn't ferment this down to its final state by any stretch of the imagination. And we've also got bananas, which are prebiotic. So this is a very good muffin for helping to support gut health.